what's going on, traders? It's Johnny here with Trader X. Thank you guys so much for tuning back into the channel. And as usual, I wanted to go ahead and provide you guys with an update and let you know how my day trading did go today. And so as you guys can see on your screens, unfortunately, today was another red day. I was down about $111 on ticker symbol TQQQ, and I was up about $3 on ticker symbol SQQQ, right? And so for any of you who are new to the channel or don't already know, these ETFs that I trade are, they do correlate with the NASDAQ. So whenever the NASDAQ moves, these things are triple leveraged. So they'll move so for every 1 percentage point that the NASDAQ pushes up or down, these will move 3 times that, right? So if the NASDAQ's up 1%, TQs will be up 3% and vice versa, right? SQQQ would be the inverse ETF version of it. So as you guys can see, the NASDAQ had a big fall. So SQQ is the inverse ETF of it. And as you guys can see, it actually had a big pop, right? But let me go ahead and get right into today's breakdown and what I pretty much wanted to talk about. And that's ultimately what led to me being down, over $100 today. And so the biggest mistake I made today that I want you guys to learn from too is what happened right here at market open. And so as you guys can see on a bigger time frame, what we have been seeing is the NASDAQ as it approaches the SMA line, which is this green line here. It'll consolidate for a brief period of time before it actually gets rejected and, starts to sell off. So as this thing consolidated, right, as it approached the SMA line, it fell, picked back up. It was at the SMA line, got rejected, fell, picked back up. It was at the SMA line, and now we did see it fall today, right? And we actually are seeing it still continue to fall right now in the after hours. But as you guys, or what you guys will notice is that, this thing does tend to consolidate for a brief period of time when it is at the SMA line. So I thought that we were honestly going to be trading more sideways today and we wouldn't actually continue to sell off today. But what I failed to take into account was most recently, as it approached the SMA line, right, the NASDAQ got rejected. It didn't hold for a brief period of time there like it did here, right? So this is a larger period of time that it held above the SMA line and traded sideways. Here, it did it for a shorter period of time, right? So as this thing picked back up here, I should have been more aware that as of the most recent data I could base my decisions off of, it didn't hold for too long. So there was a good chance this thing could fall today. And so ultimately, that is what we ended up seeing. I thought it was going to trade more sideways. So at market open, when we saw the influx of buyers and it caused all this selling pressure, right? What ended up happening is you guys can see this increase in volume, right? So it started to drive the price of the NASDAQ down. And as it did so, I thought I was going to take a little TQQQ play and, in hopes that it would bounce off the bottom VWAP and, start to trade sideways on the day, right? And approach the top VWAP. But ultimately, that's not what ended up happening. What ended up happening was I got in with my initial 25% position size. And then this thing continued to sell off aggressively. And I did a poor job of managing my losses, right? So rather than just, cutting the trade after it broke below the bottom VWAP, which would have made sense, right? I decided to let it run all the way up until down here. I ended up cutting losses finally after it dropped this much, right? And being in with only a 25% position size, I was actually down already about over $80 on the day, right? Just off this one trade. And it just goes to show how important it is to manage your losses on every single trade, right? That's why it's so hard in this market to, especially as day traders, to be, consistently profitable. Not impossible, right? It's just hard because of the fact that you have to be able to apply your trading methods to every single trade you take. So obviously, where was my big mistake with this trade? Well, say I got into here and it played and the trade went perfectly according to plan, right? So it ended up hitting top VWAP and I cut it for a profit. That means I would have only ridden this thing up 0.8%, right, on the NASDAQ. But, sorry, excuse me about that. But I ended up letting this thing fall all the way down here before I cut losses. So best case scenario, I still couldn't have made more money than I risked on this trade. And that's what I'm trying to get you guys to understand. So what you guys will see is I was down about 1.1% on the trade. best case scenario, I could have made 0.8%. So obviously my risk to reward ratio was horrible, right? Absolutely horrible. And I need to do a better job of that every single time I take a trade heading forward, right? The rest of the week. And so that is something I want you guys to learn from. So say you guys see a potential play, right? A setup where this thing you tried getting it on the bounce and hoping to sell it at top VWAP. What you guys need to implement is a good way to cut your losses at a smart time too, right? So what I mean by that is as this thing continued and continued to bleed and trade, below the EMA, it was not in my best interest to hold on in hopes that it recovered all the way back up here, right? What I should have done is cut losses, and what you can always do is get back in if it ends up actually going according to plan. So as this thing continued to sell off, right, I could have cut my losses here rather than riding this all down. And say none of this happened. Say it ended up bouncing around here, right? After I cut my losses, it bounced and started to reverse. Well, once it broke above the EMA, it could have been a better indication that it's no longer, going to aggressively sell off as it was, and it might actually start to reverse itself. So that would be a more smart point of when to buy back in, right? But that's the beauty about it. You can cut your losses and you could always buy back in. When you don't cut your losses, this is exactly what ends up happening, right? So use me today as a example of why you cut losses. I ended up writing this thing all the way down, and before you know it, I put myself in a huge hole. And then the rest of the day was pretty much all choppy, right? It was just trading sideways for the most part. And it was more hard to make money. So if I just cut my losses there, saw this thing was continuing to sell off, I could have, waited for this thing to pull back up to EMA and then ride it back down like it did here. Just this one play alone here, if I was patient enough and got into the inverse ETF, could have made me well over $100, right? And it would have been directions clearly in my favor, the volatility's there. So that would have been a more smart trade, right? And then as this thing breaks above the EMA and starts to no longer get rejected by the EMA, but actually use it as a support, maybe that's starting to indicate to me that it could actually start to reverse, right? And change direction like it ended up doing. So that's ultimately everything I wanted to talk about today. I hope you guys were able to learn something from my huge mistake I made today. But other than that, if you guys are new to the channel, we really do appreciate if you guys were to like and subscribe to the channel. We are trying to grow our community, and it's a lot easier when you guys are subscribing and liking the videos. But if you guys have any questions at all, or want me to break down any stock in one of my videos, just go ahead and drop a comment down below and I will go ahead and do that. But yeah, that's ultimately everything I want to talk about. I hope you guys were all able to end green on the day and are enjoying your day as well. And I will be posting my recap tomorrow, and I will see you guys then. So take care. Have a good rest of your day.